We're back from lunch. Madam Clerk, item number 22.
Item 22 is from the Public Works Department to accept the Calaveras Transit Fiscal Year 2016-17 Year-End Performance Report.
Mr. Krovitz.
Thank you, Jeff Krovitz, Public Works. I would like to request to continue this item and bring back at a future meeting, hopefully soon. We need to make revisions to this final performance report based on information that we received late yesterday from the fiscal audit. There's a little bit of items that we need to clarify to be able to get back to you an accurate and complete report.
Okay. So any objections from the board? None. Any objections from the public? Staff? Okay, we will remove this item from today's agenda and look forward to it in the future.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, item number 23.
Item 23 is also from Public Works to authorize the board chair to execute an agreement with California Rock Crusher Corporation for concrete and rubble grinding services at the Rock Creek Solid Waste Facility for the period of April 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019 for an amount not to exceed $150,000.
Mr. Krovitz.
Thank you. This item is for a services contract to enable us to process and reuse asphalt and concrete that is brought into the Rock Creek facility. We generally reuse that material on our roads and building winter pads for our work. We haven't had a contract in place for a year. And so we have some fairly large piles now that we need to reduce and reuse. We went out to bid, only received one response. This group is local and we've had them under contract before. So the recommendation, of course, is to authorize the execution of this agreement.
Any board questions? I have a couple questions, Mr. Krovitz. One is, we received this from various sources, various places, obviously contractors, whatever. And do we charge?
Yes, we do.
We do charge. And in that scale that we use to charge, how old is that?
1997, I believe.
So we're due to maybe go through a nexus study in everything over there and bring it up to date on our charges, so we can at least charge recovery for what we are spending at the time.
That's the plan, sir. We have a drafted RFP for a services contract. That's one of the task orders. That's one of the tasks within that contract, and we're hoping to push that forward this year, this fiscal year.
Okay. All right. Thank you. No. Supervisor Olvera, your light's on.
It is. Thank you, Chair. A question. Solid Waste Committee, would they have any engagement with this particular issue?
Not necessarily this item, but the nexus study that Supervisor Tofanelli spoke to, yes, absolutely.
Okay. I just want to make sure that was on the table for our next
Yes.
meeting. All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, for public comments, any public comments on this?
Gregory Gustafson. That's my area where I live, so I have just a couple of questions. If they're going to be increasing the volume, is there going to be an increased time period during the day for which this crushing will take place? Is there a consideration to noise? I live in La Quintana, right over the hill. I know there's certain times of day where you can hear the crushing take place, and it's a large, you know.
Yeah, this will be at the landfill.
Landfill only?
Yes.
So they're bringing in temporary equipment out there to do it with?
Yes. It's
Okay,
a mobile
thank you.
contractor bring in equipment and crush it out there.
All right, thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion. I have a motion by Supervisor Clapp.
I'll second,
Second
Mr.
by
Chair.
Supervisor Oliveira. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0-1. We're going on to item number 24. Oh, I think we'll have to take a break for about 30 or 40 minutes. Oh, no? I'm outnumbered, Madam Clerk.
So item 24 is from the Office of Emergency Services to receive a presentation and staff recommendations on associated 2017 storm damage recovery, specifically Murphy's Drive, and provide staff direction on options, and receive a presentation on emergency ingress and egress to existing subdivisions within urban and forest interface, and provide the Office of Emergency Services with policy recommendations for staff direction.
Mr. Lutz, should we need a 5-minute break for you to get the OES?
It would be helpful if I can at least grab Michelle. That would be one second.
I would concur, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I was going to make that request.
We're going to take a 5-minute break. We have to get the OES officer in here. All right, we're back. Madam Clerk, item number 24. Did you read it? I don't think you read it. You already read it? Okay. Michelle, you're up.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry to be late. Michelle Patterson, OES Director for Calaveras County. Item 24 is an item, a presentation for the board where we're going to request some policy direction, but really circles back to the February 27th board meeting where we had public comment regarding the Murphy's Drive winter storm damage. So I'm actually just going to turn it over to Mr. Krovitz to give us an update on the winter storm damage, specifically the Murphy's Bridge.
Thank you. Jeff Krovitz, Public Works. As you recall, this is one of the major damage sites that resulted from the 2017 winter storms. The two 48-inch culverts that were overwhelmed by the floodwater and washed out, causing collapse of the road. Murphy's Drive provides a link to Pinebrook, parts of Pinebrook subdivision from Moran Drive. We put this up as a high priority for Cal OES on our list of projects that were then forwarded up to FEMA. FEMA accepted it and came out, investigated, put together under their new criteria, put together damage estimates, and I got this essentially project worksheet late fall of 2017. I had requested what's called hazard mitigation to support potential upsize in culverts and to also help fund hydrologic studies to verify that we don't put something back in place that then washes out in the future. As you recall, right after that, we approved a contract for a disaster recovery program manager, and it was anticipated that this work in this project would move to them to bring it forward. And it is one of the high priority task orders that they're currently preparing. The project, under a FEMA recovery scenario, will still require environmental clearance and environmental studies under NEPA. And that will include, as you're probably tired of hearing, archaeological, both historical and cultural, endangered species. These studies are anticipated to take anywhere from 4 to 6 months, and whether we take this project on without reimbursement or we do it within the current disaster recovery program under FEMA will take the same amount of time because the requirements are the same, at least for the archaeological resources and endangered species under CEQA. The current situation is that the road is closed. It's a detour. It's still a single way in and out of this subdivision. This provided a partial second way out, but not an entire second way out. And so the residents, as they brought forward at the 27th meeting of February, indicated that it's a high risk that they feel that they're living under. We provided a town hall meeting, Supervisor Oliveira and myself and Michelle Patterson, where we presented in a lot more detail than we have time here for now, the options that we were under, the risks of going one way or the other, and then dealt with additional issues in terms of ingress and egress to and from the subdivision, which is kind of a separate issue that we may get to onto this item as well. The policy question, I guess, that we are bringing in front of the board today is, does the board wish to proceed with a project without funding recovery, meaning that we will fund this out of the general fund, I'm assuming, or do we continue with the schedule of this project under the scenario where we are receiving reimbursement, which will likely take longer? There is obviously a third option to put a temporary crossing like we did at Blagan. However, the difference between the Blagan site and this site is I doubt that this site would rise to the level of FEMA recovery. The fact that it's been washed out for a year, the fact that there still is another access and egress, even though it's longer, would likely not make it reimbursable. So we would pay for a temporary bridge, and then in the future we'd pay for the replacement of these culverts, thereby doubling the cost, and the county would take essentially full responsibility. So that's the first issue in front of us today. Do we want to stop here and allow the community, or do you want me to continue?
Let's stop here. I've got a couple questions.
Sure.
First off, the current storms that we just had, has it degraded this site any more than what it was, or did we put anything into place to prevent any more washing out of it so it doesn't undermine even more the road or anything? Have we looked at it since then?
We inspect it after every rain event, or snow event as it were, and no, it hasn't changed in the last year. But of course, recall that the passage where the culverts used to be allows a lot more capacity than we had with the culverts in place.
Well, there's nothing, yes.
So not only is the water moving through there at a lower level, but not as fast because it's not being forced into a pipe system.
And then the next question I have is, if the county takes this on with no recovery in order to move it along quicker, is there a possibility for the CEQA document that we can use a negative deck?
No, because there is no way to do this work without getting into the waters of the USA. Once you get into the waters of the USA, you then have requirements that are federal requirements and state requirements. And the state requirements under CEQA would be the 1600 series permits from the California State Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as a water quality permit from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. So we don't escape those by going our own way.
Is there water flowing 365, or does it dry up in the summer months?
It's considered to be what we would title a blue line creek. So it's considered to be waters of the USA and therefore jurisdictional.
Okay. Supervisor Oliveira?
I do have comments. Thank you, Chair. So if I understand this correctly, no matter which way we look at financing this project, we're going to have to at least do a CEQA. And if we go to FEMA financing, we're going to have to do a NEPA.
They will do the NEPA.
All right, so NEPA being the National Environmental Protection Act, CEQA being the California Quality Environmental Act. And there's no way we can get around that.
No.
That's a very strong statement to make, trying to get around regulation. What is the time difference, to the best of our knowledge? If we go ahead with this project on a county bond, on a county dime, we know we have to go through CEQA and NEPA, or if we go through the FEMA process, how much time does that save us? I know I'm putting you on the spot here,
Yeah,
Mr. Clovis.
and that's very difficult.
Maybe Michelle Patterson could help us with that one.
You know, I'm not sure that anybody could answer that. what I've discovered over the last 2.5 years on my involvement in these disasters is that if we choose to go the FEMA course, we have no control over the schedule. And regardless of whether FEMA gives us a schedule or not, they don't have a way to predict it either. If we go the CEQA course, it's a little bit more predictable, but it's not necessarily a time saver. Okay? So the things that you're asking about are very, very difficult to predict. The easiest thing to predict, of course, is if we had environmental clearance, how long would it take us to do the work? And you yourself, from your experience, know that it's a matter of weeks.
Absolutely.
So I can't really give you an answer on that because the federal participation side of it, I have very little way of knowing, and the state participation side, we have several things that are up in the air in terms of how long does it take SHPO to respond to the request if we've discovered archaeological resources. That's kind of out in the air. Another thing is that if it is an environment that is if it's likely to possess an environment in which an endangered species could survive, one needs to do what are called protocol surveys, and protocol surveys have to occur within a certain time frame. So if we can't get out there in the spring, I'm thinking the May timeframe, to get those protocol surveys, you automatically lose a year, regardless of which choice is made in terms of a replacement option. So I don't want to make light of it, but we are caught with a closed road, damage from a storm, a declared event, and a choice of 2 or 3 not very good choices. All 3 will be expensive.
Okay, here's the real kicker question. What kind of money are we looking at? And I know that's a very vague question to bring to your attention, but what kind of money are we looking at?
The engineering estimates that I've made so far in Public Works that I did last May estimated construction costs in the $300,000 and $400,000 range, which would mean soft cost, support cost, conceivably the same amount of money. Okay, so you're talking $600,000 to $800,000 for a total project replacement. FEMA's opinion of cost is less. Their estimated cost, I believe, for this replacement was $186,000. So that would mean their estimate is between $200,000 and $400,000.
Thank you, Mr. Clovis.
Okay. Supervisor Mills, would you like time?
Yeah, I've been in the county a long time. I know this location very well. This is part of a larger problem and how it accesses Moran Road. And if we're going to accept federal and state strings and the delays that are caused by those strings and the limitations that will be caused by those strings, we'll in essence be putting back what we already lost. That's the best we're going to get. If we backed away from that concept and looked at it if it was our own project and the timelines that we would have if we didn't have OES or FEMA in the game, I guess the question would be, which makes more sense if we're trying to accomplish something quickly? As we talked about with White Pines Bridge, purchasing it versus leasing it versus whatever else we could do, there's a lot of options on the table. At some point, there's going to be another location in Calaveras County where there's going to be a need for a bridge. That's just a reality. Sierra County has how many? That's a rhetorical question. It's okay.
I actually know.
The point is that because of that potential need, the cost of us owning a bridge outright, even if it's to be put in this location for whatever time is necessary, to me makes way more sense than just continuing to leave a gaping hole in the infrastructure. So I'm more interested in not just the cost component, but the timeline component if OES and FEMA was in it versus they were out of it and we were just going to do this on our own, and to what level do we want to make the other infrastructure corrections and upgrades that we feel are critical there one time for the next 50 to 100 years versus putting something back, which we're going to face again here in the next major event. We know it'll happen. And so where do we want to play? And I think, Michelle, that's your question, is what's that policy that we want to say, and how quickly do we want to move on getting that policy accomplished? It's not a money, to me, it's not a money issue. It's a timing issue.
Indeed, you're correct. The only thing that I would say is that the federal government allows what's called a hazard mitigation program that says if you can meet a certain benefit cost ratio, they will fund hazard mitigation to prevent the same thing from happening in the future or a similar disaster from happening in the future. So that would fit within the time frame of the federal program. If we take it on to improve or give betterments to this crossing, increase the capacity, slow the water down as it comes through the crossing, those two things are very important, we would fund everything. And so I understand what you're saying. You're comparing financial risk versus life safety risk versus time risk. What's the risk of not doing it? That falls into life safety, I believe.
And also the long-term rewards of doing it right the first time.
Right. Yeah. So there's a slight difference between this crossing and what we did up at White Pines in terms of width, length, cost. This one would be a more costly alternative if we went with a temporary bridge than what we did up at White Pines. But it would be very, very similar, and the time frame would be very similar.
Mr. Clovis, a temporary bridge of this type, it being a sexual structural.
A what
A
structure?
sexual structural design on a temporary bridge like we have at a component, if you will. So we can configure this bridge, this material, if you will, for another site under different circumstances.
And
So would it be feasible to actually county buy a temporary bridge? And if we can, and if we can install that, can we continue with the permanent repair under the FEMA program? I know we may have to do some studies, but is this an avenue we can at least look at?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was the intent on the White Pine site as well. And the ability to make a purchase of that structure at the end of a 20-month lease is still within our agreement. The timing, it would be lovely if the timing would be such that we could have Blagan ready to go and recover that structure, reconfigure it, add a few more of these component parts, as you said, to make it meet this site. Wider, not as long.
So, and
But
actually, we could actually have two bridges that we can interchange those component parts and make one long bridge
If
or several
we-
smaller bridges.
Correct.
So there would be benefit after this incident. Is
as
that
long as
correct?
we go with the same manufacturer.
Okay.
And that would require a finding by the board.
Okay.
So, but again, you will pay for the bridge and the cost of getting that installed, and you will pay for the project to replace the culverts.
Can you give us a ballpark on that cost?
Again, if we go with the temporary bridge, I believe that our total project costs up in White Pines were in the neighborhood of $300,000. The bridge itself would be more expensive because it would be a two-lane bridge. And then the rest of the costs in terms of building the approach roadway, since we don't want to have environmental impact, we would do the same scenario where we set it on the pavement and build up roads up to it. So I'm guessing that we're looking at a $400,000 bill, of which, $100,000 to $150,000 of it would be throwaway costs that we're not going to recover. When we go into the permanent project, we're going to take that material and recycle it or throw it away. And you'd keep the bridge in the middle for another day, for another site.
Mr. Lutz? If we decide as a board to go with this option, What would be the financing stream on that?
You have a couple options. Obviously, we have funds available in the Teeter account. We also still have contingency funds budgeted for this fiscal year that we could draw from, which would be general fund. There were a number of options that we could address that certainly all of those accounts would be able to absorb that cost based on that temporary bridge discussion.
If we decide to go that way, what type of strain would that put on our other financial commitments for the rest of the operations of the county? Is there anything that would be eliminated or delayed to the point where it would be detrimental?
No, contingency is just that at this point. It's unallocated general fund that's there for these types of situations. The impact would be it would decrease our fund balance projections that we've been discussing. Teeter similarly is at this point in a designated fund, the Teeter fund, that would be used for capital projects, but at this point is not specifically earmarked.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lutz.
Supervisor Mills?
And to further your discussion, contingency is something that's required as a percentage of our budget by state law for exactly that reason, is to have it available should it be needed. The point still is that if we do an outright purchase of a bridge, in whatever configuration it is a capital asset. We would own it at the end, no matter what. So it isn't like we're leasing something and losing something in the lease process. I just want that to always be in the consideration as recoverable cost as an asset.
Well, that brings up another issue. Mr. Krovitz? Are you aware of any county or municipality that went down this path and bought a temporary bridge and was able to lease, rent, or whatever, make use of that bridge to other entities to be a revenue generating issue?
Not under this scenario, under different programs, yes, but not under a disaster recovery scenario.
Okay.
I'm not aware of it.
Sierra County's doing it.
Sierra
looking at
County's,
Looking at all avenues here if we can.
Sierra and Plumas.
Plumas is another one. Right.
Plumas is the one, I'm familiar with both of them. I actually worked on the Plumas project. They were purchasing a bridge for a detour, and they got credit against part of that purchase for the detour, and then they paid the balance and kept the bridge. Plumas's plan was to do that on two different structures. So they had two different bridges from the same manufacturer that gave them the freedom to have a long, narrow bridge or a short, wide bridge or anything in between.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Krovitz.
Thank you.
Could I speak with Chief Johnson, please?
Good afternoon, Mike Johnson, Evans Pass Fire.
Chief, how are you? Thank you very much for showing up today.
I'm great.
Did you
Talk-
draw the short straw to be here? Is that?
Sometimes, yeah, everybody gets their turn, right? No, it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I need your expertise on something. How is our emergency response to Pine Brook and Blue Lake Springs 14, 15, 16?
Well, I'd say in generality terms, you're looking at about a 9-minute response from Evans Pass Station 1, right to that where Murphy's and Avery come together in that junction. Now, I believe the most impacted folks are the ones that are beyond that point that exit Murphy's Drive. And taking just a standard response, not code 3, takes about 1 minute and 20 seconds from our estimation from the farthest piece all the way out. And I think there's some folks here that could either support that or even have some different, residential numbers to get in and out of there. So in other words, from what I could figure, about another 1 minute and 20 seconds of response for our folks to get back in there in the more severe impacted areas because of Murphy's Drive isn't there. So 9 minutes from the firehouse to one junction and then tack on another 1 minute and 20 seconds to get to some of the places back in there that we could probably save some time by using Murphy's Drive if it were there.
Okay. So, simply stating, if we had a way to cross that void on Murphy's Drive, we could improve our response time by 1 minute and 20 seconds. Is that what we talked about?
I think that's a fair statement, you know, and it's one thing when we're trying to put one engine and a couple of ambulances and a battalion chief into the residential area for our most common calls of a medical call. But then again, it's another thing too, when we're asking residents to leave the area, there's a lot more places for them to go if we double the escape route, if you will. So that would probably even be more of an impact in the more rare but more severe situation of some sort of an evacuation from, you know, a myriad of different, you know, threats that people may need to be evacuated for. So yeah, I think it's twofold to that for sure.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
Before you walk away,
Yes, sir.
has there been any discussion or consideration about blowing a road, an emergency road or something across onto Love Creek?
Oh, yeah, there has been. I think that's long time coming, and recent discussions with the land neighbor, if you will, SPI, have gone on over the last 6 to 7 months, and we've definitely, they seem to be very willing to help improve an access point off of St. Moritz that brings you back down in the Love Creek area, and we're working on quite a few other things. You know, I say we as in the interagency cooperation, whether it's Water District, CAL FIRE, SPI, or even the state, to try to connect some of those existing old logging roads, if you will, for all that area and throughout the area, really. But specifically for 14, 15, and 16, I think improving that St. Moritz and making it a designated escape route that would connect the Love Creek area to the backside there as only an emergency evacuation, wouldn't be open all the time, in other words, is a true reality that you'll see happen sooner rather than later. That's my gut feeling. And it also enhances the ability for the Love Creek folks as well to have a place for them to escape.
I was just thinking that, you know, if we could generate the political will to start that discussion from even at this board level and have staff and everybody start thinking in that direction, that there needs to be a secondary access out of that area. There just has to be. And it's been going on now for decades. So this is not a new issue.
And I think that we do have a willing partner with SPI, and I think that that support, reaching out to them too, is a real positive one. How I think they've even talked about when the weather is right, that maybe you'll start seeing some of those, you know, equipment in there to start to improve it. And those have been verbal conversations. So, you know, I believe that's what's going to happen. I can't speak for that agency, but that's been some of the discussions.
And the grade changes that occur coming out of there, you have to think about your equipment and whether or not you can make a transition into that.
Yeah, currently speaking of, I would feel comfortable with a fire pickup truck and even a Type 3, which is essentially what, you know, our state foresting agency, CAL FIRE, operates, and most local agencies deploy to wildfires. So you could do it at the higher clearance vehicle currently, and hopefully with the improvements, we'll be able to do a lot more.
Thanks, Chief.
You're welcome.
That's it.
Supervisor Clapp, you have any questions or anything? No? Okay, I'm going to open it up to public comments on this subject. It's at 3 minutes per person.
Is there going to be a test on what is being handed out here? Okay.
Here's a crayon.
My name is Les Olson. I want to thank the board for putting this topic on the agenda today. Our group, the Blue Lake Springs 14, 15, 16 Community Action Committee, attended the February 27th meeting of this board to illustrate the long festering safety issue of Murphy's Drive culvert crossing washout. At that time, we asked this board to take immediate action to remedy this dangerous situation. At the February 27th meeting, we illustrated the risk to life and safety presented by the year-long detour caused by the washout. Today, we bring you additional materials and guidelines to help this board prioritize immediate action. We have provided the board with several fire-safe regulations and governmental codes in California. I bolded many of the excerpts from them and in large type for us old guys. What many of these highlight is that they were prepared as basic or minimal wildfire protection standards. We're aware that many or all of these codes have become the statutes of the day long after our subdivision was approved and built. We know we can't retrofit our situation to the standards and codes of today, even though they illustrate the safe, we live in the forest. We also realize that the urban wildlife interface is an evolving issue for those tasked with the fire safety. If we've learned anything from the firestorms in Sonoma, Napa, and Santa Barbara counties, it's that wildfire risk can be unpredictable, and that the safe egress for residents and ingress for CAL FIRE and Ebbets Pass are critical life safety considerations. The residents of 14, 15, and 16 are ready to maintain 100-foot clearances, practice fire safety, keep constant vigilance. Now we need the county to do its part to immediately repair the Murphy's Culvert Crossing to protect the neighborhood access and egress should a wildfire event occur. Additionally, we realize that from your board notes and Jeff, that a solution to the culvert crossing is coming, as we've talked about earlier today. The crux of the issue seems to be at what pace. That being said, the question then becomes, what is acceptable risk for us? To the tax-paying residents of units 14, 15, and 16, when faced with forest in the throes of tree mortality and a heavy fuel load, the time is now. The possibility of living through 2 more fire seasons is not an acceptable risk. Thank you.
Gentlemen, I thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name's Mark Worth, and I live in Unit 16 in Blue Lake subdivision. I'd like to make a few comments. Due to my experience, I worked over 30 years in the fire service. I retired as a division chief in charge of fire operations in Fremont. Among my duties were developing response times for fire and medical emergencies. To me, money and life safety, forget it. There's only one thing to think about, and that's life and safety of these people. Our community has legitimate concerns about compromised response times, both into and out of our development. Since the loss of the culvert crossing on Murphy's Drive over 13 months ago, the potential for disastrous results are high with the road in its current state. We have an older demographic in our development. It's my experience from my job, we know that the brain starts to die 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen. A fire squares itself every minute. We respect and are more than satisfied with the job Mike's Ebbets Pass Fire provides. It's probably the finest rural department I've seen around. But they have to be on the scene to do their job. We ask you to please take these life safety issues to heart. Avoid a tragedy that is a real possibility if this issue is not addressed as soon as possible. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, my name is Mike Sobek. I live on Aspen Way, which is Unit 15. I come in front of you today to speak on behalf of the Murphy's Drive Culvert Crossing. I'm recently retired lieutenant with the Bay Area Police Department with over 33 years of experience. And when I retired 5 months ago, we decided to move up here where we've had our cabin for the last 17 years. And I want to speak on behalf of this issue from a public safety perspective. I've been in part of 2 major incidents in my career, the Loma Prieta earthquake and the Oakland Hills fire. and I know what poor planning can do to a community, a city, and a county. I was quoted in the paper the other day as saying that this washout culvert crossing, that we are living in a death trap up there, and I stand by those words. We are absolutely living in a death trap. But what is also important to me is our first responders. And I think about them because that was my life for so long. And I wonder what a deputy sheriff responding to a call, maybe a break-in or a domestic dispute, and what if that officer was in a fight with a suspect up there? And the chief was right. It's about 1 minute and 20 seconds extra to go around instead of going through Murphy's Drive. And what used to be a mere 20 seconds to go from Murphy's to Avery is now that long. And I can be overly dramatic and stand here for 1 minute and 20 seconds to really, really show you how long that is. And I wouldn't want any of our deputies in our county to be involved in something that long without a cover officer responding to that call for that extra 1 minute and 20 seconds. I'm not going to do that, but I want you to please understand that it needs to be addressed now. It needs to be taken care of now. And please vote yes on this, the affirmative, to get this done, so no one loses a life because we did not decide that, or you did not decide that it was a priority for us. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jane Olson. The Community Action Committee wrote a petition, which you have in front of you. We gathered 119 signatures asking that the repair of the Murphy's Drive culvert crossing be expedited and completed as soon as possible. This culvert crossing is a critical transportation and public safety link, as identified in the petition, between the surrounding communities and the 192 full-time residents living in 14, 15, and 16. This road closure left residents with only a single ingress and egress route in the case of a major emergency, which creates an unacceptable risk to health and safety. All of the codes that our committee provided you in your packets speak to the safe access of emergency wildland fire equipment and civilian evacuation concurrently. This does not exist right now. We ask that you and the related agencies prioritize this repair and expedite the process of funding, permitting, design, and construction of the Murphy's Drive culvert crossing as soon as possible. In case of a life-threatening disaster with no real evacuation route in place that will work well, if at all, case in point, a downed tree closed the detour evacuation route to any vehicles for several hours on March 16th. God forbid anyone fell over from shoveling their driveways that day. Without the Murphy's Culvert crossing available, there was no ingress, no egress into units 14, 15, and 16 by any vehicles whatsoever. I know because I was shoveling and heard no noises coming up the hill. Snow and road conditions also affect how easily the streets on the evacuation route can be accessed. In addressing the Murphy's Road closure, we identified a serious bottleneck that will exist in a large evacuation of residents along Avery Drive. There is no access to units 14, 15, and 16 without the use of Avery Drive. This short street requires widening so that concurrent evacuation and emergency vehicle ingress and egress can occur during a disaster, as well as in the winter when icy conditions on this road often block the route. While we focus today on the Murphy's Culvert crossing, we believe that the work on Avery Drive should also be completed in conjunction with that road work to really ensure public safety back there. We've gathered 112 signatures on a petition asking for this work to be completed as soon as possible as well. In our appearance here on February 27th, we were under the impression that there were few funds to deal with all of these issues. However, at the road closure town hall on March 10th in Arnold, it was stated that several million dollars had been identified.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
That's it.
Sorry, guys.
Good afternoon. I'm Joyce Perrondi, and I'm a full-time resident on Grand Tetons and Arnold. I'm also a part of the committee for units 14, 15, and 16. I talked to Sam Bearing Towing Company, which is located in Murphy's, and they also do all the AAA towing. And they provided me with a little bit of information. They said they respond to the Avery, Murphy's Drive in Avery approximately once a month, and sometimes it's multiple, they have to deploy multiple trucks at the same time to handle these emergencies. So again, I want to reiterate the former speaker Jane's comment that if there was a block situation on Avery Drive, there is no access in or out for us. I'd like to finish by quoting a statement by Al Segala, who's a member of the Taxpayers Association. He made this statement at the board meeting on February 27th, and I quote, "You really shouldn't have to have a bunch of citizens come here to lobby you to fix a bridge. So I ask, please be proactive in getting this life-threatening issue resolved this year." Thank you so much for your time.
Good afternoon. My name is Jerry Sachs, and I live in Unit 15 of Blue Lake Springs. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my neighbors and friends make their plea to encourage you to authorize the County Roads Department to begin the restoration of Murphy's Drive culvert crossing. Rather than rehashing what they have said, all I can say is ditto. We need our crossing back. It is imperative that this repair is done sooner rather than later for the many reasons you have heard today. And it is also important to note that to delay will increase the cost of the county by thousands of dollars. The damage to alternate access roads into units 14 through 16 will create the need for even more costly repairs of the roads in the area. As an example, county road maintenance crews valiantly repair the potholes and surface damage to Flanders Drive, which is in the pictures that I just passed around, which is also the dam for Pine Brook Lake. Flanders Drive is being seriously damaged due to the dramatic increase in traffic on this stretch of road. But sadly, the repairs last less than 4 days, as you can see from these pictures. Those pictures were taken 4 days after the road was patched. If we lose the Flanders Drive access, we will be in an even more serious life-threatening situation for several hundred additional homeowners in the Pine Brook area and Blue Lake Springs area. Units 14 through 16 would be trapped in their homes without no emergency service access to the area. I pray you have heard our concerns and will have the compassion to vote on this matter tonight so that badly needed repairs to the Murphy Drive culvert crossing can begin immediately and be completed before the 2018 fire season. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chairman, member of the boards, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ramona Green, and I live on Aspen Way in Unit 15 as well. I know you've already heard, and will hear more, I'm sure, from the residents of Units 14, 15, and 16 of the safety concerns regarding the status of the Murphy's Drive culvert crossing. Let me please state that I, too, am extremely concerned, but I'm not going to reiterate what's already been stated. I would like to address this point. At a recent meeting concerning this issue, I heard the comment addressed to us, the residents, that we chose to live here. Yes, we did choose to live here. Yes, I did choose to live here too. But when I chose to live here, there were two exit points. I could turn either left on Murphy's Drive or I could turn right on Murphy's Drive. I could go down the path, I could go to the right and go up, or I could even go across town. But today I can only go one way. I can only go right on Murphy's. Does this concern me? Yes, it does. Would I choose to live here today? Absolutely not. Not with only one exit point. Several weeks ago, during one of our earlier storms, a young lady living in our area, our neighbor, could only turn right. The road was extremely icy, and she ended up going off the road over a 3-foot embankment. Luckily, she was not injured. 2 weeks ago, during the big snowstorm, a young couple in our area were going out and could only turn right. But they couldn't take the detour because, as you heard, a tree was down on Douglas. Even with a super-duper 4-wheel drive truck, they still got stuck in the snow. While putting on the chains, the truck slid and nearly pinned the woman down. Again, luckily, no one was injured. So, again, I say, today I would not choose to live here. Knowing what you now know, would you choose to live here today with only one exit route? Would you choose to have your family live here with only one exit point? If yes, you are much braver than I am, and you're not imagining that that young lady could be your daughter, or that young couple could be your children, or perhaps even one of your spouses. If no, please choose to vote here today to have the work begin on the repairs as quickly as possible. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. My name's Lawrence Perandi, or good afternoon, sorry. My name's Lawrence Perandi, and I'm also a member of the Community Action Committee, Units 14, 15, and 16. I'd like to start by addressing the life-threatening urgency the residents of our subdivision could easily be facing as we enter into our summer months and fire season this year. First, there's been at least 3 lengthy newspaper articles published recently stating that the Avery Drive bottleneck is a potential death trap waiting to happen in the event of a major fire. This happens when residents are trying to flee the area while emergency vehicles are trying to access the area. These articles were in the Union Democrat on March 10th and the Calaveras Enterprise February 15th and March 15th. With that said, if I may, I'd like to appeal to you from a more of a humanitarian standpoint. Please take a moment to think about the 190 plus full-time residents of our subdivision as if they were your family members, children, grandchildren, parents, grandparents. There's a major fire this year with loss of life. In addition, children or adults who live but burn beyond recognition. Could you live with yourself if you were the one that didn't approve the funding and it was your loved one dead or lived but burned severely beyond recognition? I don't know if I could. I have a family member that was severely burned at 7 years old. You could not recognize that child. Today, at 33 years old and after 30 plus surgeries, not much better. Believe me, we don't need another Oakland Hills or Wine Country firestorm, which left over 64 dead, and who knows how many are suffering today from severe burns. Please approve the funding, expedite the process, and start the construction this summer. We would like this agenda item to be voted on today and would appreciate a start target date. It's the right thing to do. I'd like to finish up, and I asked well, thank you. I'll just let it go at that.
Anyone else?
Good afternoon. Brian Wilkes, Fire Chief of Murphy's Fire District, but I'd like to speak as someone that grew up and was raised along that river right on the other side of Murphy's Drive there on Vallecito. One of our additional concerns is in the wintertime, if this doesn't get done in time, is the fact that Flanders Drive is also a culvert crossing that holds the dam up to Pine Brook Lake. If those culverts go, just as the ones downstream did, there's not going to be access either way. So just as consideration as you're thinking about this, thank you.
All right, seeing no other public comments, we'll bring it back to the board. comments, staff questions?
I would probably be supporting you folks, but I'd like to make some statements. I'd like to ask two questions. Has there ever been a fatality there yet? Has anyone died there yet? So you had a death there already?
We're old people back there.
No, I'm talking about with the accident. So no one's died because of that bridge being gone? That's the question.
What I thought you were saying is anybody expired back there due to
Yeah, okay,
medical
okay.
emergencies, yes.
Because I have a problem here. And so don't think I'm putting you guys down. I'm using you guys for my district too while we're here. Because I have a place, the same thing, mine would just be striping. Put stripings on the road. Because I need a turn pocket, and I already had a fatality on the road because there's no striping there. We're in the process of putting another 172 homes in one subdivision, 98 in another subdivision on top of these roads that's already bad, that's servicing about 5,000 homes. I have a sidewalk that's not put in that I have people having to walk across the street into the middle of an intersection and stuff. So I will probably be supporting you folks, but I want the same support from my district. My district was dumped on several years ago. I have a fatality there. It's horrible, and I need the support from the board to help me fix that. And we're talking $10,000s of dollars, not hundreds of thousands of dollars. Thank you, guys.
Any other board comments? Questions? Supervisor Oliveira, your light's on?
Thank you, Chair. No doubt, this isn't my district. You folks are my people, just like the other 44,000 people in this county. But I'm going to be selfish here. I've been on those roads in an emergency vehicle. I know where 14, 15, and 16 are. And I know that we can't wave a wand and make this happen tomorrow. But I'm prepared to make a motion that the county expend the funds to get this problem addressed as soon as we can, the best way we can, and not turn our eyes to the rest of the problems in the county. I would support this, and I want to thank everybody for making their presence known in their presentation, and I thank you.
Yeah, no, we can't.
Could I have a clarification? There's a motion up, but we were talking three options, I believe, from Jeff's.
No, I wouldn't make the motion just yet. I just want to make a comment.
Oh, okay, because I just want to know which motion.
No, that wasn't a motion at this time.
Supervisor Mills.
Something else that was included in the packet has to do with directing the county staff regarding other roads and all of
Yeah, this was
that.
just the first part of it. And
Yeah.
We're going to separate it because these people wanted to talk specifically on Murphy's Drive.
That's what I was thinking
So
is,
we have a second presentation regarding other subdivisions that are allowed to be built with just one ingress.
Okay.
And not ingress and egress going in and out.
so the question before us at this point then would be to find what is the consensus of the board to option one, purchasing a bridge outright, leasing a bridge, doing whatever. We've all got to work through that, decide what's best.
Well, it needs to come back to board. We're just asking for staff direction on which way to go, and then it will come back to us for our option on what we would like to do: purchase a temporary bridge, go forward with FEMA, what our direction. But we need to give staff direction on which way to pursue to bring back to us, and it's due to come back to us on April 10th, which is the next board meeting. If you want to pursue that and give direction for this item now, and then hear the second part of this, and then give direction for that part, then we can do that.
Mr. Chair, if we bifurcate this and give direction on this first issue,
Sure.
I think that might be able to give us a clear path to go.
let's poll. Supervisor Clapp?
Yeah, I'm on board.
Supervisor Mills?
Yes.
I'm on board, so
I am also.
you're up, your district. Would you like to be the first to go off on direction and what you would like to see done?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, I would. I think we need to direct staff, both OES and Public Works, within their means to bring back options. And I would suggest option one would be a FEMA finance program. And option two would be a total fix on revenues from the county. And option three would be a temporary bridge and hopefully some financing stream from FEMA for the permanent repair. And that's, we can modify that to whatever which way staff seems to present that. Do we understand each other? Am I clear on that?
You are, but I have a, before you go forward with that, Mr. Krovitz, you made a statement that this is United States waterway. So I'm assuming that the Corps would have jurisdiction over this. I would like to make a suggestion. I'm on board with what you have said, but I would like to make a suggestion that Mr. Krovitz, myself, as chair, Supervisor Oliveira, and CAO contact the Corps in Sacramento and ask for a meeting with them in hopes that we can present to them the emergency necessity for them to accept a negative deck on us completing the emergency needed repairs or construction to go forward with the needed repairs of this road.
Mr. Chair, I would concur with that and would be happy to be part of that committee.
Supervisor Clapp?
I would second that even.
Supervisor Mills?
I'd like to be sure that we add some type of guarantee of timelines, and we're looking at costs, but also how quickly can things move along? I think
I think that can be brought back to us on April 10th.
that's what I'm asking for, is to be sure that that's included in that discussion.
Absolutely.
So we look at that cost benefit and say which one makes the best sense based upon timing as well. So
I have a question or clarification for the April 10th piece, since I don't want to set an unreasonable expectation. I don't currently have something slotted to come back on April 10th.
I thought we had talked on the 10th to bring it back. If worst case scenario, if we can't make the 10th, can we make the 24th?
24th or the 17th if
Or the
we needed
17th,
to at this
yeah,
point,
17th,
yes.
24th. Yeah, okay.
Is there a possibility to make it April 10th, Mr. Lutz?
Yeah, we have had that conversation,
Okay.
but we'll look at bringing it as soon as possible. If we can get to the 10th, I would like to meet with the Corps next week and
Okay. One question, Mr. Chair. Mr. Krovitz, Ms. Patterson, do you have current resources to complete that direction that was just given to you? I mean, do you need anything that the board needs to approve right now? We can't ask you to do a job without giving you the tools.
If we could utilize our disaster recovery program manager for this series of tasks, that would...
I apologize for leaving OES out of it. Yes, Michelle, certainly part of it.
Then yeah, I don't know how quickly they can respond because we don't have this currently as a described, defined, and adopted task. So I don't know how long it would take to put that together, and if they're...
We can meet as early as tomorrow and go over it, but I think the necessity with the timeline to get something done before the oncoming fire season is certainly something that I would hope would get their attention and we could work forward on it. So we can meet and talk about it and have that discussion as early as tomorrow if everybody's available.
I can be in the morning. We have an afternoon inspection of the Utica flu. Yeah.
I'm available in the morning.
I'm scheduled to go to Monterey.
You scheduled to be in Monterey? No, we can meet with Michelle. You meet in the morning? Okay.
Okay.
How about 9 a.m. tomorrow morning?
We're at?
Here at the conference room?
Okay.
Okay. All right, so is that direction? Did we all agree on that? We've given direction, staff? Okay. Move on to item number 2 on this.
I guess I will kick this off again. A lot has already been said in reference to the item of access and egress. Most of the subdivisions up the Highway 4 corridor within this urban wildland interface or urban forest interface were approved prior to the changes in the Fire Safe Code. Changes to the Fire Safe Code would not have allowed these subdivisions to be approved without 2 distinct means of access and egress. That Fire Safe Code describes that pre-existing conditions would be legally non-conforming. They could exist, but they could not be forced to, for example, upgrade a driveway, upgrade a long driveway to meet the current code. The Fire Safe Code also doesn't require a government entity to correct their roads to meet the new Fire Safe Code. Regardless of that, the RIM program, which attempts to raise funds for road improvements based on future development and assigning of a proportionate responsibility for the impacts of that future development, contemplated the widening of Moran Road when it was first put together early in this century. The bottom line here is that for us to do the widening that's being asked, it would need to be programmed as a capital project. Right-of-way would need to be acquired. Environmental documentation would need to be cleared. You're looking at a 5 or a 6 year project. So these are very long-term, and they're also very pricey. The 5 miles of Moran Drive was subject to an update study in the RIM program. It was estimated that 5 miles in 2008 would be $22 million. Shorter sections, of course, would be less. So in a way, it's a policy decision. It's also a resource decision. And if we do it for one, we do it for all, I would assume. This is not the only subdivision we're talking about with this type of
There are many throughout the county.
Many.
Not just up there. I live in one myself.
Yeah. And it's not just up there.
It's not just up there.
It's a countywide problem.
It's a countywide problem that was allowed before. Correct.
No. Back when they thought one access and egress was fine.
Before the fire codes, yes.
Yeah. So that's the nature of where I think that we are at. And I am not discounting the need. I'm not discounting the danger. And I'm not discounting the threat to life safety or to our first responders. Merely questioning our ability to do this, given our resources, financial and human.
Any questions? Mr. Supervisor Mills, your light is on.
RIM fees are probably going to be a tender area for me, because as you know, the majority of the subdivisions that have blown up have been either in District 5 or in District 4 in Copperopolis. That means the majority of the RIM fee money came from those 2 areas. And they have been forced to build their roads to the PRC standard. These roads we're talking about in these other areas, and I defer to places like Mineral Mountain or other remote subdivisions which never paid into any RIM fees at all during that time. So I would like to be sure that if we expend RIM fee money to make these kind of repairs, that it be done holistically and to be thinking about in the same way that we looked at our capital improvement projects in the past, that it be looked at from the perspective of what are the life safety issues, how many vehicles are on the road. All of those criteria that we'd used before would go into this kind of decision as well before we made any kind of decision.
Is there not a list of priorities for the RIM fee? And is this on the top of the list?
It is on the list. It is not on the top of the list. And again, the only one on the list currently in this area is Moran Drive. And you also have to understand that the RIM fee is not, the way it was developed, the way the nexus was defined, it is not the sole funding source. It funds its proportion.
That's correct.
So I feel like it is again, without resources, regardless of whether I have a RIM fee program that I can apply these monies to or not. The current balance of my RIM fee isn't going to take care of anywhere near what we're looking at here. And if we're expecting it to come out of other roads and bridges funds, that's not going to happen. There are other grant potentials that are outside of Public Works purview that I'm not overly aware of. Just assuming that potential for fire safe grants or things like that. But I see a problem here. I don't necessarily see a solution. And I wish I could bring something stronger to the table.
Well, it's giving this item in our board packet is asking for direction, and 3 of the items is asking for direction, is saying to bring back, it says direct staff RES, economic development, planning, COG, and public works staff to identify subdivisions with limited access within the county in a prioritized order based upon number of full-time residents served by the primary limited access road, regional importance as defined by emergency service providers, and access to commercial and public services, and project funding viability based upon limited local funding. So you're asking for direction for these departments to come back with that information to us for us to discuss and go forward with some type of plan to address all of this. Is that not what we're being asked to do today for this item?
Yes, I wrote those things.
Okay. I mean, because I'm not sure, you know, in my opinion, it would be beneficial to all of us, and especially all of these departments that we've listed here, to at least have an identification of the number and magnitude of these subdivisions that we are dealing with within the county, and to identify the regional importance of each one of those. I think that, in my opinion, is probably a very good idea. So we're at least have access and knowledge of it, and can at some point have a discussion on, again, some type of plan to address it going forward. Supervisor Mills?
Thank you. Again, I have to defer because of my being involved with the fire service myself. Limited access always means where I'm going, can I get away? Can I get out? And there's many places in this county where maps don't give you the opportunity to identify, is this a place I have to back into instead of drive into? And I see a gentleman out there who knows what I'm talking about. As well as the slope for Avery Drive, for instance. How big a slope is that road? been on that thing with a four-wheel drive in the snow. I know exactly what you're talking about. Then take a right there? Don't know how. Those are the questions that need to be in this criteria, is we have to take into account the terrain, as well as the certain times of the year when your ability to make a specific turn or an entry exit might be difficult. And it isn't just about fires. It's about in all conditions. How do we safely make the maneuvering that we have to do with a Type 1 fire engine to be able to not get hung up in a corner? And if you hang one up, as we had a Napa County engine hang up on Murphy's Drive during the old Gulch fire, we had to get a cat out there, pick up his tailboard to get him away from the driveway. Those kind of things we need to think about. And PRC 4290 started to address that, but it didn't fix all of the history decisions that we've made prior to it. And so if that is part of what we're trying to accomplish here, is to identify those areas where they become critical choke points to our successful ability to operate our emergency equipment in the urban interface, then let's go that direction. But if it's strictly because of an access issue by itself, that's not sufficient.
Okay, I'm at this point opening it up to public comment. Is there any public comment on this issue?
Yeah, Mark Worth again. Appreciate your comment, Supervisor Mills. You know what you're talking about. I was at the Oakland Hills fire too, and engines coming in and people getting out, it's a big, big problem. That's why a lot of people died. But one thing, and I'm not sure if this is the right place to make this suggestion, but I always thought that if we do have a evacuation in that area, that Moran Road should be taken over with traffic control and be made one way, all the way down, so that no cars can come up, so that people have a steady stream all the way to Highway 4. And I don't know who to address for that. If Mike, I can help. Yeah. But we're not right. I think that's a good start for getting people out of there safely. I've been through the Gulch fire up here on a strike team, been to the Darby, Butte fires through that. Some we go up, some we go down. We don't know which way we're going to have to evacuate. But anyway, I wanted to make those comments. I've also been in a box to the hospital down Moran Road, so I know that my trip to the hospital would have been not as expedient if it wasn't for that culvert being there and going straight down Moran. So there's a lot of things here, and I know it's a major problem, but I thank you for hearing this anyway. Thank you.
Again, to remind you, this is about the second item on here on ingress and egress on subdivisions. Okay, we've already gone over the other one.
My apologies.
Okay. Any other public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, bring it back to the board. Supervisor Mills?
Well, it's interesting, the gentleman mentioned Old Gulch. My strike team, including Ebbets Pass, was initial attack on Old Gulch. It was a Sunday, and if you recall, and it was 103 degrees, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and that broke out. I have pictures of it in the trunk of my car. So it just brings home that it isn't so much about how we move people, but how we move our emergency equipment around people in those critical times. And as you found in Oakland Hills, there were people who were following your engines thinking you were the safe exit out, and all it did was made it worse. So we have to consider those choke points as being the primary reason we're talking about limited access. If we focus on that first, then I think we'll identify very quickly where those key components are.
Okay. Want to give staff direction on this item in any way? Any comments?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, $22 million, despite what people may believe. I don't think the county has $22 million to put towards this project. So if it's going to be completed, it has to be completed in phases. It is a serious health issue, emergency access. And there are some things we can do in crisis times. A good suggestion was maybe make Moran Road one way, but those decisions are made in the operations center when we have a crisis, and those decisions are made basically by CAL FIRE, and then law enforcement is instructed which avenues to block or which avenues to make one way or whatever. Unfortunately, we don't have that information at our hands at the time we need to. So that's one thing that we're going to have to work on, Michelle. We're going to have to work on better planning in conjunction with CAL FIRE. Because as you well know, if you're in public service, if we have a wildland fire situation, CAL FIRE is the boss. They take over. Our local fire is at their direction. I had personal experience with that with the Butte Fire up at the command center. But let's talk about what we can do in the future about Moran Road and Avery Road and getting those things where they should be. Folks, it's going to be a long process. I wish I could sit here and tell you that we can get that done by next year. But $22 million just, I don't see it in this county in the next year or so. So we have to bite off like the piece of the elephant that we can chew. And hopefully we keep that going. At this point, I would recommend that we keep it on the list. We keep our eyes and ears open, see what we can do to improve that position on the list, but accept the possibility that we can't do the impossible. And we can't pay for the impossible with what we don't have. So.
I would suggest, first, I would like to ask a question. Mr. Krobus, do you know when the last time the RIM fee list was brought before the board to reevaluate?
At least 6 years, I think.
6 years?
I think
so
approximately
we're about due. Maybe.
We're due.
We're due. So can we give direction to at least bring the RIM fee schedule back to this board for us to review it and maybe have a discussion on it, to maybe reset some priorities on it and see where we are fund-wise in it. And I think there's other fees out there that are collected specifically for roads when developers come in. So I'm talking about the Valley Springs Basin.
Benefit basins?
Yeah, benefit basin. If there's other ones in other areas.
I don't have any up there right now that I know.
Not up there, but.
No, I'm talking about up in the.
Yeah, but we're talking the entire RIM fees thing. So if you could bring some of those things back to us for a discussion, and maybe we can look at reprioritizing some of that. If you can do that.
Yeah, I'd like to see the benefit basins included in this discussion.
Benefit basins.
Exactly.
Whatever ones are out there. Okay.
Do you need a poll on that?
You take Supervisor Platt.
Yes.
Yes. Supervisor Mills?
Yes.
Supervisor Oliveira?
Yes.
And I'm a yes too. So hopefully that gives some direction. And so we will move on to the next item. Madam Clerk, item number 25. You guys, is it item 25 driving you out, or?
Yeah, afraid of that. I don't want to screw it up.
Thank you. Thank you for spending your day with us.
We could appoint them to a bunch of boards. Let's appoint them to a bunch of boards while they're here.
Item 25 is from the Board of Supervisors, the appointment of applicants to serve on various committees, commissions, advisory boards, and county service areas. Today we have 3 applications for 2 vacancies. The first is on the law library. There's 1 vacancy for a term ending 12/31/2018 for an attorney or general public member. We have applications from Kenneth Arola and from Ann Pestalozzi, who was the incumbent. The second one is for the Mental Health Board, one vacancy for a term ending 12/31/2019 for a general public representative. We have an application from Emily Smith.
Okay. We can take these both together unless we want to have somebody wants to separate them for a
Right.
reason.
Well, we
Mr.
gotta
Chair, I'd like to
decide.
separate them.
We got to decide on one of them. There's two.
Oh.
Yeah, I'd like
Well,
to
you're right, I'm
bifurcate
sorry.
them.
I'm incorrect. On one of them, there's two. So can we take the Mental Health Board, with Emily Smith first?
If you'd like, and I do have a question, Mr. Chair.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed on the application that Ms. Smith is she of adult age of 18?
She is not, and we do have parental permission included in your agenda packet.
Okay.
And we have a recommendation from Supervisor Garamendi.
Then we can, is there any restriction on placing an adult, or is the recommendation or the qualification of voter in the county?
No.
I researched the issue of her age, and I could not find any basis for exclusion. We figured just for insurance purposes to require parental permission.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Additionally, Ms. Smith does become 18, I believe, next month.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Answers my question.
So, any other questions on this item? Any public comment on this item? If not, I'll come back for a motion for this item on Mental Health Board.
So moved.
A motion by Supervisor Mills. Have a second?
Second.
A second by Supervisor Oliveira. Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 401. Now we'll move on to the Law Library. We have one vacancy and two people that applied for it. I see three lights on.
I'm wondering who's the incumbent here?
Ms. Pestalozzi.
Because Mr. Rolla also states himself as the incumbent on his application.
No, his term had expired. He did not serve last year.
Okay.
He's a prior incumbent.
Madam Clerk, is there a requirement to have an attorney on the law library?
No, it needs to be an attorney or a member of the general public.
Okay.
How many general public members do we have now on that committee?
We have, right now, none. We had Ms. Pestalozzi. We do have an attorney currently appointed. It's Steve Calente.
Okay.
Salente, sorry.
So we have here a nomination or a motion or discussion, a preference?
Well, I'd like to see a citizen member be on this board, if it is one of the things that can be done. Just hear the rest of the
Mr.
board's
Chair?
opinion.
Supervisor Oliveira.
It's my understanding and my experience that the Board of Supervisors Chair sits on this board.
That's correct. I do sit on this board.
And that will rotate when the chairman or chairperson of the board rotates out. During my tenure as chair, I did serve with
Pestalozzi.
Ms. Pestalozzi. I found her to be a very dedicated person to that and committed to the library. But I've got to be honest, I've also dealt with Mr. Kennarola, and I found him to be very competent too. So I think either choice would be a fine asset to the board. Just which one do we choose?
You want to flip a coin?
No.
Well, do I have a motion for either one of them? Do I have a motion for Pestalozzi? Or do I have one for Arola?
I would move for Kestarozzi.
Okay, so I have a motion by Supervisor Oliveira for Pestalozzi.
We either do that or we get the short straws going.
I know.
So
is that
I
a
will
second?
second that, save us
That's a
the.
second. So is there any public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board and call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 401.
No way.
So, Madam Clerk.
Supervisor announcements. In compliance with AB 1234, chaptered as Government Code Section 53232.3D, board members shall provide brief reports on meetings they attended at the expense of the local agency at the next regular meeting of the legislative body. This report is required to include meetings attended for which there has been expense reimbursement, mileage, meals, lodging, etc., but may also, at the board member's discretion, include any other meeting attended by the supervisor on behalf of the county.
Okay, we will start with Supervisor Clapp. Your light's on,
yeah.
raise your hand.
Hey, anyway, I didn't cost the county any money this last week, but I did go to the Jenny Lynn Fire because my buddy Dick Brown got a badge, and he's now the official chaplain there. So, and I believe there was 2 other gentlemen were dedicated with badges too. And it was a nice ceremony, and so I enjoyed that. But I had to, that's the only meeting I was really at.
Okay. Supervisor Mills?
Well, I guess I expended money. Attended Mountain Counties up in Auburn. This was a general discussion. One of the most interesting parts is, the Butte Fire was in 2015. And Lock Antenna's upgrade of their treatment plant has yet to be fully completed and operational. Now we're going to be nearly 3 years. So that's something to consider, is infrastructure and how long it takes to recover infrastructure post-fire or any of these emergencies. They also discussed some new engineering advances and data acquisition advances, including how quickly drones are evolving in the system for infrared, as well as looking for cracks, things that you just normally can't put a person there. They can use drones very quickly for data acquisition. We have a tour of the Utica water system tomorrow. Be meeting with Congressman McClintock this afternoon on his support for AB 142 Wild and Scenic with the 5 provisions that have been recommended. April 10th, there will be a Mountain Counties meeting at 3 p.m. in the San Andreas Town Hall for those that are interested in attending. And there's also one on the 13th up in Placerville on water rights, the Bay Delta Plan, and the recent Byron Bethany decision, and how that plays into some of the water rights that we have in our county. As a source county, it's very important to understand that we do have some priorities, and we have the ability to maintain those if we are involved in the political process. So I appreciate everything that everybody's doing on those projects. That's all I have.
Supervisor Oliveira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yesterday I attended with Chairman Tofinelli the Central Sierra Child Support Committee, our annual quarterly meeting, and I must say, and I think you'll agree with me, that is one agency that's run pretty darn good.
It is.
They're very impressive. I'm glad to be on that committee, and I want to commend them doing a good job for not only the state, but for the county of Calaveras. I want to take a personal note here, and I was just informed by email that an event scheduled for April 3rd involving some folks are going to take place. I want to say I'm very happy that Marita Calloway is in better health and will be able to attend. I was just notified of that, so I understand she had a bout in the hospital, so that's good.
She had pneumonia and she was in the hospital. That's my understanding. I spoke with her yesterday, and she is to be released today. So,
good. Thank you, sir.
Going on.
Other than that, I'll be attending the tour with Supervisor Mills up in Murphy's area, and I will be also meeting with Congressman McClintock tonight in Murphy's. Thank you, Chair.
And I have nothing to report. I will go to staff. CAO, let's. No? County Council, no? Board Clerk, do you have an announcement?
I do. I just wanted to announce that the Friends of the Library held their annual Trivia Bee on Saturday night. And they had a great turnout of people and support. And my condolences to your team for not making it to the finals.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. They were some very, very, I've been involved in that for many years. Geez, it's probably 10 or 12. And the questions asked on Saturday night regarding Highway 49 were some of the toughest questions that were ever asked at the Trivia Bee. I don't think, well, they went to sudden death with 3 groups, and it took them, what, 4 questions before they even got a winner, because nobody knew the answer to the first or second or the third questions in sudden death. And it only took you answering, your group answering 1 question to win it. But the questions were just that tough. And I think just 2, yet to get in the 3rd round, the 3 finalists that got out of the last round, they only answered 2 of the 8 questions because they were that difficult. They were just very difficult. So thanks for bringing that up, Diane. Anyway, if that's it, we are adjourned.